It's the 22nd of November 2001. Hi everybody, hope everybody's doing good on this Monday. You can call in at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. I'm Dana, your host, I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org. Let's jump right into it. Always takes me a few minutes to get up to bashing speed. So, the picture to your right is Hinkley Point C in the United Kingdom. That's a new nuclear power station. And behind it, you can see endless farmland. Now, Britain knows better. Britain had a major event in the 50s. When Sellafield, well, it was named Windscale at the time, Sellafield, and they changed the name to Sellafield because when it melted down, instead of using nuclear scientists to go in there, they went out to the theaters and kidnapped people from the back rows of the theaters. And in these days, rich people sat up front, right? And the poor sat in the back. Nuclear power generation is the only invention that may destroy the futures of humans. And you can't do that, of course, without destroying all the other species. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's doing good. This is one of the many, many models from major institutions of radioactive fallout from Japan's nuclear reactors. It's not an accurate depiction because it's only based on venting. It's not actually based on the nuclear meltdowns. It's also global warming because this is pure energy, an invisible cloud of pure energy that'll last for millions of years. And we got this way because of the schools of mass destruction, our universities. Nuclear companies infiltrated the universities. That's global, by the way. All universities now have been taken over. So have your media and key positions in your government and all your regulatories. So, do you like this video? This was Friday morning, and we picked up the bike. Or Saturday morning, we picked up the bike on Friday. This is out in front of my back door. I didn't take it off the trailer on Friday night because it was after dark when I got back. It was raining, so the deck was slippery. It's not worth taking the chance, right? But yeah, we got her. And so Saturday morning, I went in the woods on the bike, but you got to get completely off-road tires first. Very dangerous at this time of the year to be going off-road on the bike. And so that's for next year, for the spring and fall in particular. But we'll also make, because you can put a lot of miles on it, but you can't on a dirt bike. A dirt bike, you get 10 or 15,000. These are dual purpose, and that'll only be used for off-road, but it needs big knobby tires. And it was amazing, 24 kilometers on it I put on this Saturday. And Sunday, looking for birds, no birds. No species in the woods whatsoever, no rabbits or anything like that. And I was in yesterday, Sunday, and today too. I'll show you some of those videos at the end of it. That's a huge relief, and we'll talk about that more at the end. And I'm just thankful we got that. That gives me the winter to figure out all the maintenance, to get the tires, get the windshield and other odds and ends. So by spring that'll be ready. It's a 650 BMW Darka. They're made actually for the the 1,000-mile endurance runs, just like they are, with no modifications. Nuclear power is 7 decades of economic ruin, says a new report. 7 decades of economic ruin. Every single reactor went in the hole by about $4 billion. There's been over 600 of them on the planet. The history of nuclear power is 7 decades of economic ruin, environmental catastrophes. Nuclear accidents create human misery, all species, and environmental destruction. It's an omnicide. Nuclear power is helping to drive the climate crisis. Has the Confederation of British Industry got its head in the sand? Or in the record levels of carbon-intensive cement just poured at Hinkley C nuclear plant? I showed you that was the cover picture today, was Hinkley plant. Nuclear power, apart from destroying biodiversity throughout its life cycle, produces 37 times the carbon emissions of renewable energies. So you think the United Kingdom would have learned by now, but they didn't, did they? This story here is from 2019 also. Man who exposed family to radiation was among over 500 nuclear mishaps. A patient self-discharged from hospital after receiving murder radiation therapy involving nuclear radiation murdering medicine. After returning home, he urinated outdoors and contaminated his backyard, and that the turf and the soil was removed because of radiation. So the poll today is, should we stop murdering people in hospitals by making it a crime? Should it be a crime to kill people with nuclear radiation, man-made anthropogenic radiation, in the hospitals worldwide? Should it be a crime? And the voting is open up early. Hi, everybody. Welcome. I hope everybody's doing good. I got some videos coming up for the end. We'll get into it. So should it be a crime? We got 13 votes so far at the beginning of the show. 92%. Somebody accidentally said, no, it shouldn't be a crime to murder people in the hospital. And so let's look at some of that before we jump into the rest of the show. 3% of the people that get chemotherapy live longer, like a 5-year longer with it than without it. That's the study was shown. This was repeated again. The study was done in 1995 and was repeated again in 2004. And so they estimated 2.3% in Australia and 2.1% in the United States who had the chemotherapy benefited from it. And then that they live longer with it than without it is what they're saying. And I'm not laughing, that's the gallows laugh, because 2% is not, if you're going to a casino and he said you had 2% chance of winning, would you spend any money there? And so 2%, 2.3 in Australia, 2.1 in the United States. So the question was that why are we using chemo in a hospital when it's murdering everybody, 98% of the people? So the question was, should we stop doing that? And the only way we can stop doing it is by making it a crime. If we make it a crime, because Congress actually lacks the authority to make it illegal to kill you with radiation. That was a story about a guy who was trying to buy isotopes that only the government would have access to on the black market, on the black web, right? And so he was caught trying to buy the stuff. And his lawyer filed a motion to kick it out of court because Congress lacked the authority to make it illegal Only the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has the authority to make it illegal, which is, by the way, is overseen by Congress, to make it illegal to say nuclear or poison, to make it a crime to poison somebody with radiation. And if they'd done that, then it would be illegal to put nuclear power plants in farmland surrounded by farms, because that's murder. That's why they're able to get away with it. And then 3% is the typical misdiagnosis when it comes to cancer. 3% of the people that gets chemo didn't even have cancer. They were the ones that survived, basically. So radiation, so you go to get radiation therapy, and you end up with radiation-induced brain narcosis. You have heart injuries because of radiation. From breast cancer, you end up with your heart destroyed from the radiation. Then you can get breast injuries from radiation, radiation burns, radiation-induced injuries to the visual pathway. So you go to get treated, what they call treated for radiation, and then it does all these other things to you, like my favorite, radiation-induced rectal injury. So getting radiation therapy means it's a guarantee to kill you, basically. Spinal cord recovery from radiation injuries. Radiation injuries to the aortas and heart muscle valves. Patient with radiation-induced bowel injuries. Radiation injury of the central nervous system. Radiation rectal injuries and lung injuries. And gland injuries from radiation. Liver disease from radiation. Radiation-induced bile duct injuries. And this goes on and on and on and on and on. Like, you know, this is... Also, you want to think about lead aprons offer little protection. This is an understatement. So why do many clinics keep using them? They actually... The medical establishment has asked the community to stop using these lead aprons. And so first I was like, what? What do you mean stop using? You're trying to kill everybody? Another concern is that most imaging machines that use radiation automatically determine the dose of radiation required to produce a successful image. So if the machine senses the shield, it increases the dose in an effort to image through the shield, leading to an increase in radiation exposure is being polite. And one of the downsides is that shielding obscures the imaging field, leading to an unusual X-ray or CAT scan, requiring the patient to have another very high dose. That increases his or her radiation exposures. And another study found shields were misplaced half of the time during pelvic X-rays and obscured important bony landmarks. Now, there's other studies about if a pregnant woman has 2 X-rays, the child has almost 100% chance of learning disabilities. But here's another reason to really be concerned about this bizarre ghost industry known as radiation, nuclear medicine. It's a ghost industry. There's nobody to point a finger at, right? Cassandra, this child, she was ordered by the courts to undergo chemotherapy, and she refused the treatment, saying she didn't want to poison her bodies. So a court judge removed her from her home and placed her on her armed guard, at the Connecticut Children's Medical Center. Children's Medical Center. What a disgusting betrayal that is. And they murdered her under the laws. If she has cancer, she's required to be murdered with chemotherapy. Like if you go to the doctor and you say, the doctor says you got cancer and nothing we can do for you. And you say, doctor, there's got to be something. What about chemo? Well, if you sign this piece of paper, we can get you chemo. So you got nothing left to lose. You just sign that paper. That's how you feel, right? And then that's when the murder starts now. No two chemo treatments are the same. But if you're a kid, you don't have to sign no paper. You gotta get it or they'll take you away from your family, put you in a prison where they'll murder you with a drip of chemotherapy. By law. So then the question is, should it be illegal? Should it be a crime to kill people with nuclear radiation? Should it be a crime? We got 15 votes up. Hi, everyone. And so another thing to remember is that nuclear power plants, that's a new one, by the way, you see there, they're going to build, surrounded by farms. Why are all these nuclear power plants built in farm country? Because they're all hemorrhaging radiation all the time from the fuel pools. There's no containment around the fuel pools. All fuel pools have to be vented. Even if this is a future nuclear power plant in the United Kingdom, it's surrounded by farms. And so you can't contain the radiation. That's a future nuclear power plant built in farmland. See, because that's just a model from an engineering company. And Japan, you have 14 prefectures where the food was banned for a decade in 55 countries. And you see a farmer actually harvesting food, rice, radioactive murder food, harvesting radioactive murder food by thousands of 1-ton black bags of radiation. Now, pre-Fukushima, if somebody had told you that could happen someday, you'd be like, nah, there's no way, there's checks and balances, Dana. You are dreaming. You are in La La Land. You are so lost. Hang around, we'll enlighten you. Fewer inspections for aging nuclear plants, regulators propose. Does that surprise anybody? And again, look, nuclear power plant, and they show these pictures and they'll show the beautiful, farms, and then in the background, despicable genocide machines. Planetary catastrophe. Now, there's only one planet that I'm aware of. It's called Earth. So they're probably talking about Earth. Planetary catastrophe. A worldwide catastrophe averted by a Russian crew in a burning nuclear submarine, the captain says. They all died, by the way. They sacrificed their life so the nuclear submarine wouldn't kill the planet. So why are we building more of them and shipping them on the ocean to run into landmarks that they know where they're? I wonder. France nuclear electricity production threatened by heat waves. Because they need... France, they use 70% of the fresh water in the country goes to idiotic nuclear. And then their nuclear, they get their uranium from Niger. They had a civil war in Niger for going over 60 years. They destroyed every family, every community. They destroyed the infrastructure, the government, and the borders, and the armed external rebels. They have a full-time military base there also to protect their assets. And this is where they get their uranium, their cheap uranium. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Yeah? It's just a gobblish industry, no matter how you look at it. New cases of childhood cancer increasing because of Chernobyl. Really? You don't suppose it got something to do with all the nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? I'm not saying Chernobyl's not bad, because Chernobyl's brutal. But Fukushima was brutally. Ah, yes, Fukushima village preparing for lifting of evacuation order. The village of Katsurero in Fukushima Prefecture is set to beef up its preparation for the Japanese government's evacuation orders related to Fukushima nuclear meltdowns to be lifted. in parts of its area. In part of its areas. So they're lifting evacuation orders for little spots in the community. Now that city there is evacuated, so it's not listed in United Nations list of radioactive spots. So that second one over there is average disposition, radioactive fallout, pulse and energy every second for billions of years. At, you can see 39,000. Hang on, I'll get my big head in there. So that's the second row that I got highlighted. The first row over there is people in the community. The second row is how many becquerels, atomic decays of just gamma, not alpha or neutron or beta, but just gamma. Right? Unbelievably deceptive, right? You can see Fukushima City at 230,000 counts per minute of gamma. So you got to multiply that by 600 to get the real number. But that city is not in these indexes because it's abandoned. Talk about scumbags, eh? And these numbers are terrible numbers, low numbers. They're horrible numbers, don't get me wrong. But they're low compared to what the real numbers would be if you actually included all the alpha, the betas, the neutrons. Neutrons is like plutonium, uranium, americium, neptunium, very, very hot particles, curium, the biggest byproduct. And so when you see this row here, that's people. The second row is atomic decay. So that's incredibly radioactive. 50,000 counts per minute of just gamma. And it's unbelievable that they would do it that way. And that's United Nations, of course. They're not united. They're not nations. They're the military-industrial complex of 195 countries. The village will allow residents to come back and stay in special reconstruction promotion areas, public relation areas set up in the village. This is absurdness. Stay in a special reconstruction promotion area. It's the equivalent of going into Hanford and having a little zone there with a fence around it and calling it safe. Promotion. The village aims to realize the lifting of the evacuation orders for 95 hectare special area around the spring of 2022. 95 hectare special area. And there's also 5 other municipalities in the northeastern Japan prefectures have set up special reconstruction promotion areas, and Katsuro will be the first among them to carry out preparatory stays. This is absurd. So whoever wrote this story should never be allowed to write ever again for history, not even to write to a friend. You should never be allowed to write anything ever again. Not even a grocery list, by residents in the special area. See, radiation doesn't give a shit if you clean up. If you're surrounded by nasty, as I showed you, brutal numbers of radiation, and you clean up a little section there. Like they measure radiation down there by flying over it at 1,000 feet with an airplane. And the numbers are brutal. So cleaning up a little section on the ground, the wind doesn't stop blowing, so it's going to be covered immediately in radiation. You got to clean it up, dig up all the topsoil every day. And you can't live there because it's always migrating in. Downwinders bill finally advanced to the U.S. House Committee. But this has been going on for a very long time. U.S. Representative Stanton's bill to extend coverage of downwinders in lower Mohave County were advanced yesterday by the House Judiciary Committees with a bipartisan vote. The Downwinders Party Act 2021 would update the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act to include all of Mohave County, Clark County, Nevada as affected areas. It would allow victims of radiation exposure from the communities, like all of them, who became sick with cancer to receive compensation from the federal government. They're talking about everybody in those communities, everybody in those cities, everybody in those counties are entitled to radiation benefits. That's how radiation actually works. To include all of the county, all of it, not just like little special preparatory zones. You disgusting, crazy, lunatic nuclear industry, you. For far too long, Northwestern Arizonians have been victimized and forgotten by the federal government, and Congress has the opportunity and the responsibility to deliver justice, and time is running out. And Supervisor Gene Bishop, District 4, called it illogical to deny the RECA coverage to two counties closest to the atomic blast. So yeah, how can you cover the counties further away but not cover the ones in front of you? Nuclear energy generators split. Now this is Bruce Power Canada used green bonds to update one of their disease factory nuclear power plants here in Canada. A Canadian utility sold green bonds to help fund an overhaul of a nuclear reactor. So there's no checks and balances. There's really, that's outrageous that they could do this. They don't even got a repository in Canada anywhere, and no intentions of having one anywhere in the near future. There's like 5 billion pounds or something of fuel rods here in Canada. That's all splitting the atoms all the time. It's an invisible snowstorm coming out of Canada 24 hours a day, covering the planet in radioactive fallout permanently forever. It's an unbelievable, insidious, monstrous, hideous, creepy industry. Small nuclear power plant billed as an energy fix. Again, you see Yahoo. This has been brought up. So they're talking about these barges. They're calling them barges, right? These floating Chernobyls. These floating Santa Susanas. Santa Susana in the United States is still melting down, and it's 460 times worse, more fallout than 3 Mile Island. 3 Mile Island was over 2 million people were irradiated, and he said it was equal to watching color television for another year. We actually got the studies and covered it. Now, if you didn't take down my main YouTube channel when I was out on an insect species count last year, I could direct you, or this year, I could direct you to those videos. But a couple of months ago, they took down, I was 450 kilometers away from home, no emails and no strikes. It just disappeared my other YouTube channels. So this one is a new one, and I encourage everybody to put me in your bookmarks so you can find me later. I'm censored heavily on this site. So this bizarre, of course, this is Yahoo. We'll likely have more accidents in existing reactors because it's a new technology, but these will be accidents and not disasters, said the co-founder. Like an accident, any kind of... First off, these reactors, small modular reactors, there's a scam they're doing there is they're going to use mixed oxide fuel. So the mixed oxide fuel is an absurd amount of energy, and it's reclaimed. It's already gone through a chain reaction. And so it's hot particles basically left over or collected from fuel has already gone through a chain reaction, or actual dismantled nuclear weapons. This is 2 billion times more toxic than the normal toxic stuff coming out of a reactor, because it's already gone through a chain reaction. They're putting it through a chain reaction again. And then when it puts it in a pan, It's hemorrhaging now for billions of years, lethal isotopes to all replicating cells. Anything that replicates a cell, it's genocide, ecocide, omnicide. So for him to claim that they'll have accidents but not disasters, nuclear is a disaster all day, every day. It's hemorrhaging radiation into the environment and surrounded by farmlands. And now they're going to be using mixed oxide fuel, and then the radiation they create from that is unbelievable, hideous. It's just absurd that it made it this far. And Seaborg, there's the creep himself, disconnected from any sorts of reality. Oh, he can make a lot of money making small modular, what he calls small modular reactors that don't exist as usual. Right? They always show up. Oh, we can make these things in factories. You're not making that in a factory. You're pinheads. At $2 billion each, the cheapest ones that we've seen them talk about are minimum $3 billion. And they know it's going to go higher than that because they have never built one. It's going to take 10 years to get one if they started building right now. Yeah? It'll take another 10 years to get the kinks out of it, another 10 years to build a re-incineration of that one and get that out there. And if that one doesn't smurf up, then they can start allegedly mass producing it. But we brought online 260 gigawatts of renewables. That's equal to 300 nuclear power plants in 2020 alone. It's an outdated, idiotic. It should never exist. If the world knew what was going on, it could never exist. And $23 billion for UK's newest nuclear power station. So it takes 12 of them to equal one of UK's 23 billion euros. It's an absurd amount of money we're talking about, by the way. And that's the one they're talking about, Hinkley Point. And it's surrounded by farms. Not only that, look at all the cranes. Look at all the infrastructure. They got enough cement there to build a sidewalk 3/4 of the way around the planet. They got enough steel there to build multiple container ships. So when you look at these cranes, those white ones are actually huge cranes. So look at all the precious material. Everything is the best of the best. And in the background, surrounded by farms. It's absurd. It's absurd you would surround these places with farms. And that's what the future Sizewell B will look like. Surrounded by farms. So they can poison you. The radiation goes in the farms. You eat the food and you get sick and die, and your children and your friends and your families, everybody you invited over. Nuclear power has become irrelevant, you like it or not. Net nuclear capacity increases of 0.4 gigawatts in 2020. Renewables added, it was actually 261 gigawatts. Australia mocks silly China criticism of nuclear subs. Australia mocks. First off, like Australia, right now, it's probably one of the biggest land masses that are perfect for solar and wind power. They're surrounded by high cliffs and mountains. They're continents separated from everybody. They have unlimited coastlines where they can do tidal power. And then they have natural areas for pumped hydro. But they have this incredible spot for sunshine. They should be the capital of solar power. Instead, they're the capital of misery. We're the biggest producer of uranium. In fact, their uranium was powering the Fukushima reactors that have killed the Pacific and the Atlantic, now that we know for sure. Exclusive. Merkel defends nuclear power exit despite climate challenges. So the idea of the headline is to indoctrinate people into believing nuclear is a solution to climate change. Climate change is actually caused, and this is unequivocal, by the way, is caused by nuclear. 75 years of radioactive fallout. This was the 2011, 12, 13, 2014, 2115, 2216, 2200. This is for thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, rather, of radioactive emissions, pulsing energy every second because of Fukushima nuclear meltdown is ongoing. A contractor dies at Watts-Bar nuclear power plant. It took them 46 years for one of those reactors to get working. 46 years. Of course, Watts-Bar is surrounded by farmland. A contract worker has died at the nuclear power plant. But it's not nuclear. That's what they're saying, right? They don't know. You don't know until the evidence comes in, dummy. Ceremony held to mark restart the nearest port. This is absurd, by the way. Now, why would you have a ceremony held to mark the restart of the nearest fisherman port to a nuclear meltdown, ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns? A ceremony, because that's the only way they can justify putting it in the paper, right? Held Saturday to mark the resumptions of operations at the fishing port. They'll export all of that to Canada, the United States, and everywhere else. 7 kilometers north of the nuclear power plant. 7 kilometers north by the road is a couple of kilometers by sea or bird. And these reactors are still hemorrhaging. Now, I showed you earlier, they're going back to a community many, many kilometers away, but they're going to open up a port just 7 kilometers away. Like Nami, 30 kilometers away, that place is unbelievably radioactive. Fukushima City is way past that. It's unbelievably radioactive. I showed you the numbers earlier of all the cities. So it's a big step forward for the town of Nami, where the port is located. Now, Nami's a big place, right? But the area was in a no-entry zone where radiation levels remained high. Radiation is forever. Reconstruction was completed in March. So what do you mean reconstruction? There's no nuclear academics, nuclear engineers, nuclear scientists. It was the homeless and destitute and victims of society went and picked up as many bags as they were given with dirt and told it was cleaned up. We went around and power washed sidewalks and stuff like that. They got Geiger counters everywhere. There's one town there with 3,000 Geiger counters, big ones, installed throughout the town. 3,000 that don't work, and they're in unisievers. So the whole story reeks of lunatics, of actual lunatics. You'd have to be a lunatic to trick people into going into a nuclear wasteland. That's murder, but it's not illegal though to kill you with radiation. So it's not murder. Technically, it's sanctioned. It is murder. It's sanctioned murder. Fishermen in the nuclear wasteland conducted trial operations off the nuclear wasteland before starting preparations early this year for a full-fledged genocide machine. All 31 fishing ports run by Awati Prefecture, over millions of becquerels per square meter in that prefecture, were finished in August 2019, while 18 of 27 ports operated by Miyagi Prefecture were rebuilt by March of this year. The March anniversary this year, United Nations, all the media worldwide had to come out with United Nations story that Fukushima had no adverse impacts on humans or animals for the 10th anniversary. And so this is some of the celebration they were talking about. A celebration. They had a big celebration there, and everybody ate radioactive food. How the return of nuclear power can help us get to net zero. And these are lunatics. This is lunatic stuff, but this is what you see all the time here is you see this perpetual misery machine of brainwashing. You got to keep coming out and lying about every facet of nuclear. Like the way they talk about nuclear is that everybody should get a bath every day in the fuel pools. You should brush your teeth with the water from the fuel pools. You should use the water coming from the reactor when it's boiled, it's still hot. You should probably use that as opposed to do your dishes with too. Wind and solar are expanding fast, but nowhere near fast enough to take up the slack from fossil fuels. That means nuclear will remain vital. Like you go to university for a lot of these people got to stay there a decade to get their degree because you can't get the jobs unless you come from certain families. So finally get the job or the degree, and now they can pick their job at any major newspaper. And all you got to do is nothing. They don't got to write these stories. They got to wait for the nuclear industry to send them the story. Then they're going to put their name on it. And they're going to publish it in that paper, and that's how they make money in the media. Yeah, that's how it's done. So the nuclear industry writes 90% of the stories that you see me talk about over the years. Each night, 90% of the stories are about the nuclear industry when it's coming from mainstream media. Constipated Party itself, not Constipated Party 26, itself, major industrial nations include the US, Russia, and Brazil all describe nuclear energy as a major part of their decarbonization strategy. Yeah, to kill off all the species on the planet. Well, here's a map of radioactive fallout from Japan. So, oil, gas, and coal don't have emissions that do this. The only thing that creates emissions that covers the whole planet in emissions, and it's not carbon, because that's what plants need, right? And all species, by the way, is the radiation. And this is the last, whereas coal, oil, and gas doesn't travel very far away from its source, but radiation covers the whole planet in an invisible snowstorm of radiation, and each one of these, I got them depicted here for you to look like snowfall. They're pulsing energy in every direction, each of them, up to 50 feet away, at almost the speed light, almost 186,000 miles per hour every second. How much energy does it take to make something go that fast? It's pure energy, and that's what powers millions of homes. But when you release it, it's still got the same energy, but now it's spread symmetrically right around the entire planet. And all species on the planet will attack that when it's in their body with white blood cells, displaces their red blood cells, which if you bioaccumulate a lot of it, means your immune system is compromised. So it's more susceptible to pathogens and viruses and illnesses. And it's global warming and overdrive. Globally, nuclear power produces around 10% of the world's electricity. That's a sharp drop from the peak 18% in 1990. So now it's 10% they're claiming. In the 1990s, it was 18%. But 3 Mile Island was the end of the nuclear renaissance for the United States, even though it should have been Santa Susana, which was 460 times worse. and is still melting down, a sodium reactor. Chernobyl was the end of the nuclear renaissance for the Russia and Ukraine and Belarus and places like this, and they're building reactors everywhere else but their own place. The biggest U.S. Nuclear bomb test destroyed an island and this man's life. This is Bikini Island they're talking about. Was 1,000 times stronger than Hiroshima. So it's equal to a nuclear war. A single bomb, the Castle Bravo, created 1,000 times more radiation than Hiroshima 15 kiloton nuclear weapon did. These were thermal nuclear weapons. And then it was over 1 million square kilometers of the Bikini Atolls, and 1 million square kilometers around that is radioactive. I should have had that there for you. My apologies. Bear with me. We'll get it for you. There you go. So if you look up this study here, it was radioactive fallout from the testing, which is the same as a nuclear war. Because a nuclear war, you wouldn't expect a nuclear war to have 1 million square kilometers of radioactive land, would you? Because that's what happened to the Bikini Atoll. So this man they're talking about, he wrote a book. He actually has a book. And it's just heartbreaking, I'm sure. Hiroshima, just that, they'd done a lot more nuclear bombs than that, but the Castle Bravo single bomb was equal to a nuclear war. It was equal to Russia and the United States firing 500 Hiroshima nuclear weapons at the same place, basically. But yeah, if you go look that article up there, he's got a book out. I might have the name of it there. Left his wife and his child with debilitating and deadly health problems. Detailed in a new book. I got it there somewhere. Maybe I don't. But anyway, you can find that story. You can get a... I should have had it there. I don't know what I've done with it. Anyway, oh, there it goes. It went from blue to red. That's what threw me off that time. Blown to Hell, America's Deadly Betrayal of the Marshall Islanders. And as I show you, it's all of them, right? Everybody within 1 million square kilometers. But those plumes actually radiated Japan, right? They had huge radioactive fallout in Japan after. Well, I mean, like, that was a nuclear war, nuclear testing era. The Soviet Union detonated a bomb was equal to 3,800 Hiroshima bombs worth of radiation at the one time. 3,800 Hiroshima bombs going off to one time. Opposition to nuclear energy comes from people who won't get vaccinated. So there was no opposition to nuclear pre-coronavirus. They're stupid, and then who's this guy here? Now, they're using their evidence from Our World in Data. Our World in Data, of course, is the global machine itself. It's Oxford Scumbag University. And they got all these people there where they claim that nobody got hurt at Chernobyl, for instance. And their source is Our World in Data, which is a propaganda machine. Laurie says decommissioning a nuclear power plant is a long, slow process. They usually abandon the plant for about 60 years before they start dismantling it. It looks like Humboldt is surrounded by farms, but I can't say for sure. 99% of nuclear power plants that we did look at were surrounded by farms. The radioactive byproducts last for millenniums. And they got 31 boiling water reactors like Fukushima in the United States today. And Humboldt nuclear facility only lasted 13 years. There's a money pit for you. It was shut down yearly for refueling and maintenance, and the spent fuel rods were placed in a cooling pool on the site. So when you put the rods, that's the parts of the reactor core, they're putting in a pool, and they're still splitting the atoms, they're generating huge heat. But those atoms are being sucked up by the water. That water is evaporated. About 120,000 liters every day is evaporated out of each pool. And each liter is trillions of different fission products. That's released into the air. A lot of it's going to land close by. That's why they build it in farm country, so they can poison everybody. Spent fuel and reactor waste has been and continues to be the Achilles heel of the nuclear industry. In the early decades of nuclear, it was often glossed over as something that science and technology could solve, which it still is today, right? Oh, in fact, you'll see them after claiming they got it solved, actually, in some stuff like popular mechanics, for instance, which is popular, but it was bought by a lobbying group quite a few years ago, and is used now to bludgeon opposition to all kinds of different terrible industries and misery machines. Illinois paid $694 million to keep nuclear plants open. Yeah, because the nuclear industry has a stranglehold on regulators, regulatory industries, universities, medias, and key positions in government. And they'll cut everybody's throat to keep a nuclear plant open. Everybody's throat on this planet, if that's what it takes to keep their nuclear plant open. If they think they can do it, they'll do it. Illinois legislators agreed to spend up to $700 million over the next 5 years to keep a handful of nuclear plants open. Good luck on... So that's nothing for a nuclear plant. There's no way that's going to keep them open for 5 years. They'll be back with their hands out. NASA looks for proposal for construction of a nuclear reactor on the moon. They haven't been back, allegedly, back to the moon in over 40 years. They went there and this is too boring. Technology's changed dramatically. So how come they didn't go back? How come Russia didn't go? How come China didn't go? How come India didn't go to the moon in all this time? They go to Mars, and they send their rockets to Mars, but they're not sending nothing up to the moon. It's like, no, we don't want nothing to do with it. Now NASA, scumbag NASA, which gave us James Hansen, the degenerate of degenerates, the father of global warming. I'm sorry, the father of climate change. Hang on. 276. There's only one. I can't. It's no good to say it if I don't show it, right? Big screen, Dana. Big screen. So you got the father of global warming. You got the father of net zero miles. You got the father of carbon footprint. And how are they going to get that smaller? I don't know. Gave us, that was BP. The idea of a personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertising campaign. Advertising campaign of a fossil fuel company, BP, in 2005. Designed to divert attention from the fossil fuel industry onto the consumers. Right? And then you had James Edward Hansen, who got the equivalent of the Nobel Prize from Taiwan a couple of years ago for the nuclear industry. For climate change. He's the father of climate change. In fact, his testimony was pivotal and a turning point in the history of global climate change. His single testimony marked the official beginning of the global warming policy debate, which is what we're seeing now, right? And it manifests many different ways. And now you see advertising on TV because of those four entities, that if you don't do what everybody in the industry tells you, they'll cut your head off.
Right, kids, just before you go, there's a brilliant idea in the air that I'd like to run by you. Now, it's called 10-10. The idea is everyone starts cutting their carbon emissions by 10%, thus keeping the planet safe for everyone, eventually. Now, this hasn't got to be a huge thing, but I would love it if you and your families would think about doing something.
What sort of thing, miss?
Well, like getting your dad to insulate the loft, or taking your next holiday by train instead of flying, or buying energy-saving light bulbs.
We're thinking of using our car less. I'm going to cycle to school.
That's fantastic, Jemima. Now, no pressure at all, but it'd be great to get a sense of how many of you might do this. Just a rough percentage. That's fantastic. And those not? Philip and Tracy. That's fine, that's absolutely fine. Your own choice. Okay, class, thank you so much for today, and I will see you all tomorrow. Oh, just before you go, I just need to press this little button here. Now, everybody, please remember to read chapters 5 and 6 on volcanoes and glaciation. Except for Philip and Tracy, of course.
So if you don't do what they want you to do, they just blow you up and everybody else go about their day. Don't worry, just go about your day. It's now the new norm. Thanks, James Hansen. So putting a nuclear reactor on the moon, with intentions of it being mobile, they can move it somewhere else on the moon and take it to another planet. So the nuclearproctologist.org, my organization, is a think tank. It's an anti-nuclear per se, pro-life, pro-8 million species think tank. And we advocate no nuclear in space whatsoever, because nuclear is man-made. The sun doesn't create those elements. That's why they're called anthropogenic man-made elements. And so I strongly object and resent that scumbag NASA, a corporation, would have the guts to even claim they're going back to the moon, let alone going to put a nuclear reactor up there. Now, typically, a nuclear reactor needs 1 million gallons of water a minute. They're talking about a very small one with no coolant. But, I mean, you're talking about minus 200 degrees up there. And so you can obviously see how they're going to keep it cool. NASA plans to spend $93 billion on the upcoming moon mission. $93 billion. So there's a big incentive for NASA to try. It doesn't matter if they succeed or not. They got the $93 billion and there's no auditing, right? Pakistan says empty containers seized at Munda Port used to transport nuclear fuel from China. So these containers on the ships were radioactive containers. Because once you transport fuel, used fuel, in a container, right, that's permanently irradiated for millions of years, long past the lifespan of it. Empty containers were being returned to China. Russia got these nuclear bombs are driven by reactors. And so Skyfall, I was looking at the story and I was like, I don't know if I want to read it. They don't even want to give it a proper name. And so they're talking about nuclear missiles driven by a small nuclear reactor. And the problem was that the nuclear reactor, which is driving the motor, heating up the air, right, to have, I can't even remember now, but there's a certain name for these, where you get hot air going in there and you get supersonic speeds. Ramjet motors, right? And they're going to use a reactor inside, but the problem is you're going to have radiation streaming out of the missile as it's flying. Now, they've tested a lot of them, and apparently every one of them blew up. And there's one community, we covered that story, right? When this first broke, a couple of years ago. They covered... hang on. So radiation in the community was 200 times the normal level. They didn't evacuate the community either. No, you just go back to work, let the kids out to play, just gargle when you go home. The industry's insane, right? This is insane. I didn't make all this up. This is nothing. This is just, we're not even scratching the surface of how crazy this industry actually is. Digging for peace and resisting nuclear weapons. So this was a great story in one sense. So 25 peace activists from the Netherlands, Germany, and Austria went to an air base in the Netherlands, making a plea for an end to nuclear weapons on Wednesday, October the 30th. It took a long time for the story to come out. This is some of the wonderful souls. So they went to a military base. The annual NATO exercise, Steadfast Noon, literally a rehearsal for the extinction of humanity, which is also the extinction of all species. And so what they done was they dug a hole under the fence, and the cops are still up watching them. There's the military's on the other side, the fence waiting for them. They never stopped them. They ignored them like they didn't exist, except they were there, right? They're just doing their own thing, but they were hanging out there, the police, the authorities. And so as they start crawling under the fence, then the military walks over to them and says, "Do you understand you're now under arrest?" So the police didn't come up and say, "Hey, you can't go digging a hole, that's illegal. They're going to arrest you on the other side," or something like that. The police didn't arrest them. And then they took them down the station for a couple of hours and let them all go. We need 10,000 people here to go and do the same thing, right? That's what should really happen. They entered the unauthorized military-industrial genocide machine. And if you go within a few miles of that place, you'll find children brothels and a lot of missing kids from across the country. Because everywhere they set up a military base, there's child prostitution rings right around the corner. Arrested 8 wonderful people Wednesday afternoon when they entered unauthorized military grounds. It was reported in the local news. Cops were there basically yawning the whole time. Chuckling. Let them go on under the fence. I don't care. Whatever. Who cares? The military's there. Let them sort it out. So I spent up to 6 months in U.S. prison for even attempting to enter the military base through its public main gate with a petition. Last year they shot a guy trying to do it. Like the security at a nuclear power plant, they got high school education and a permit to carry a gun, right? And then you get a job as security at a nuclear plant. They spend $1 billion a year for a lot of these places too. Film brings long-awaited national spotlight on Santa Susana Field Lab. So, this one mother in particular, her child had this rare cancer, and she lives 5 or 10 miles away from Santa Susana, and so she got to take her child for chemotherapy because the kid's not dying quick enough. So let's hit him with the chemo and get rid of the child. And she doesn't know any better, right? So she goes to the hospital to do the chemo, and she discovers that almost everybody there is from the same street as her, with their children with these rare cancers. And so they created a documentary. And Santa Susana Field Lab, they had 10 uncontained reactors, by the way, on that site at one time. Which means all the radiation, instead of being contained, is released into the environment all day, every day. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And the one that melted down there, in particular, the major one that's still going on now, is 460 times worse than 3 Mile Island, was a sodium reactor. They also had Rocketdyne was set up there doing tens of thousands of missile tests. And they were using all these concoctions of harsh chemicals. And so every time it rains or snows over the years, that's constantly washing off the site into the surrounding communities. They actually built a city with 500,000 people within 10 kilometers of it, who didn't know there was an ongoing continuous meltdown there, and that the whole area, the whole story is just absurd. Children have suffered life-threatening cancers attributable to the radionuclides and chemical agents that have long been released to the surrounding communities from the Santa Susana nuclear wasteland that sits above their homes. And so they've got a documentary out too. Yahoo ran with it because this story's gone viral, and Yahoo's trying to control the narrative. And the site included 10 non-contained nuclear reactors, as well as fabrication facilities for plutonium, uranium. And they have hot boxes there too. Right? They call them hot boxes. These are special lead boxes with 4-foot lead glass, and they have these manipulated arms that are in there you can control outside, where they tear apart fuel rods and reclaim the uranium plutonium. Springsteen's legendary 1979 No Nuke concert has the best live version of The Promised Land. I'd like to see that. I got to look that up. Because this was hid away since 3 Mile Island, right? Just disappeared. But it was a whole bunch of bands. It was Jackson Browne, who I absolutely loved this guy. I'm familiar when I was young with his music. That band's music is just beautiful. Even today, it's just beautiful music. Of course, Graham Nash, right? And Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Bonnie Raitt and John Hall and Muse. Man, like, these were all the people, the bands, major bands, were doing a No Nuke concert. They had a 200,000 person strong rally at Battery Park City landfill where they protested the ongoing deployment of nuclear energy. Nuclear energy. So no wonder they hid this one away, right? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that a crazy story? Dominion alert sirens going away at Lake Anna. Well, they should keep the sirens. The sirens are put there by protesters who brought it to court and forced nuclear plants to have sirens to warn the population. But it turned out they were never going to use the sirens because that would be the death rattle of the nuclear industry at that stage, right? Look what 3 Mile Island done to them. And so they're going to replace the sirens now with cell phone notification. And so a lot of businesses, you can't have your cell phone with you. And time is everything. Like, if you live within 10 miles of a nuclear power plant, you should leave. You shouldn't be there. No one should be there. No animals, no birds, nothing should be there. Within 50 miles, if you've done a study within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant, or 50 miles where there's no nuclear power plants, radiuses, what you see is an absurd discrepancy. So within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant, you would see explosive numbers of Alzheimer's and dementia and autism, diabetes and Down syndrome and autism and schizophrenia and heart problems and liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline. You see an explosion of 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries, but you wouldn't see that in a 50-mile area where there was no nuclear. And most people in the United States live within 50 miles of a nuclear plant or a nuclear dump. But those who live within a 10-mile radius of Dominion Energy, North Anna, and Surrey nuclear power stations, the sirens will soon be replaced with wireless emergency alerts will come directly to cell phones. 100% control, eh? China is ready for a full-scale invasion of Taiwan. That's not going to last very long. It'll be over in just it's either America gets into a nuclear war. Now, America was going to nuke China, right? We've covered them stories here. They had the batshit crazy admirals and generals wanted to nuke China. They were screaming for several years straight, we got to nuke them. Back in the 50s. They're still out of control, right? They were doing all these nuclear tests, and they were like, let's do China, let's knock it down before they get that. The Chinese military is now at or near the capability to invade Taiwan. Well, Americans have set up shop in Taiwan, right? That's what's really going on. And China doesn't like that. And the Americans got 900 bases worldwide, by the way. They got 54 of them is surrounding Iran, right on their borders. 54 American military bases that have biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons stored on those sites. Harris makes history as acting U.S. president amid speculations on future. So she's the first one in 245-year history of the U.S. that a woman held the presidency. And Hillary Clinton almost held it, right? And so when Trump won, before Trump won, the media was just disregarding him. But once Trump won, within 5 days, they had turned the whole planet against Trump. Trump was worse than Kim Jong-il immediately, and it never stopped, and it probably never will at this stage, right? And so they had everybody distracted. Meanwhile, Fukushima was melting down and covering the planet. But I remember distinctly, there was a pivoting point here, where even 5-year-old kids, when you see them, would tell you a Trump joke. You couldn't go into a shop without the people behind the counter telling you Trump jokes. I've never seen before or after anything that comes clear. Comes even close to it. The world's largest science film fest kicks off. You know, that's going to be nothing but propaganda and nuclear. Nuclear plant warrants cautious optimism, but questions still remain. Nuclear plant warrants cautious optimism. No, just anybody who promotes nuclear should be arrested and jailed for 50 years. That's the best thing to do with that. And a spy may not be the best place to park your cash. Real investments. Uranium. I suspect that by now many readers will be familiar with the drivers behind the recent northward march of the price of uranium. So this is Seeking Alpha. Again, we see these medias that are put on a pedestal by Google and Bing and that, promoting uranium when uranium is flatlined now for over 10 years. And so the recent spike, and there's been many of these for 10 years now, the recent spike in uranium was because the Sprout in Ontario had bought up physical poundage of it and artificially inflated stocks. That was used to suck investors, and this is an incredible Ponzi scheme. For goodness sakes, please don't put your money in uranium. This is a genocide, an ecocide, omnicide machine, but they're scamming you. They'll take your money. The stocks will falter soon because it's not from actual physical use. It was just So, like, it's like if I went and bought all the gold on the market right now, the price of gold would shoot through the ceiling, right? So they took that theory and they used it for uranium. It's 100% artificial. So they bought their stocks, they artificially inflated the stocks, you bought into it, they sold their shares, took your money and walked away. The price will drop out again. Maryland should lead in developing nuclear power and continue the proud Marine tradition. Oh, like the 21 suicides a day tradition, or the 29,000 rapes a year in the military tradition, that tradition? You just shut up, you punk. Bunch of punks. Climatologists and scientists. They're actually dirty words around my place. If anybody says climatologist to me, better apologize immediately. These people were created to promote nuclear. Their solution for everything is more nuclear. What have we got here for you? We got a couple of little videos for you. Shot over the last couple of days. And this one is with the gimbal. I'm not sure how this is going to work out. Let's have a look at it. Just bear with me 1 second and readjust the volume on these things. Because they're cracked wide open. Yeah, it's not working out the way it's supposed to, is it? And I deleted it off my computer, so it's not going to work for us. But I was supposed to, because on my computer, this wouldn't, I didn't realize the computer wasn't going to, this was this afternoon. Yeah, and so that's not, my computer can't handle that format. I'll change it on the camera, my apologies. That's a new one where I'm doing the 60 frames per second. So this was this afternoon. I went up to the top of this hill and I sent the drone down. I sent the drone down to survey ahead of me. And I had good footage, but usually I do it from the external, right? And that handles fine. I imported it into TriCaster, and TriCaster couldn't handle it. That's okay. So a huge win. We already got the bike now, and we had extra donations coming in that made that happen. So we had Anonymous C donated $100. Asked to remain anonymous earlier, and Nancy R donated $50. And so I got the bike for $3,000, and we were $50 shy, and just spent about $60 on fuel. So another $110 to get the bike home. And later on, next whatever, we got to get 2 new tires. I was trying to figure it out, but I'm going to have to give them a call. I couldn't figure it out on my own. So we got to get new tires and a windshield. The windshield's $110. The tires look to be about $190 to $220 each. They're going to be strictly off-road tires, big knobby tires. And we'll use that in the spring and the fall for extra trips. Because there's like 400 and 500 stretches of groomed trail out here. And it's groomed for the winter time for skidoos, right? And so there's thousands of ponds along these trails, small ponds. We want to do bird counts along that and look for spiders this come year. And then we'll go, we'll tow the trailer behind the quad in the summer, right, when the weather's appropriate. And so I'll play those videos tomorrow night, but I'll play them from the computer, so that way I'll probably have more video tomorrow anyway, but we'll play them videos tomorrow night because it's not working here tonight. And I deleted the ones that were on my laptop. My laptop is piped in externally into the TriCaster, the operating system, right? Let me see here. Yeah, so unbelievably thrilled that we got the bike. Let's go back to the bike here and bring it up one more time for everybody. That's a 650 BMW, 26,000 kilometers. You can get 200,000 kilometers out of them. So that's a huge deal. That's a major win, and it caught me off guard. We raised the money right away, and we got ready. I didn't want to take a chance and wait for the bike, and so I went and picked it up. I called them to make sure it was going to be okay, and because I had got my pension, so I took what was left of my pension, and then the extra money came in the next day, right? The extra 150. So that's huge. No, that's huge. Okay, let me say goodnight to everybody, I guess. Yep, more equipment. Jace, James Lucid, hi James. Colette S, hi Colette, thank you again. Everybody. Yeah, it's a huge deal. Ella. Lori, I only serve one king. Hi, Lori. Christopher. Yeah, take DCA just a little tiny bit if you got the powder, and then like a little small glass, small amount of water. And like a very small dose 3 times a day, because your body can only absorb so much at a time. It reduced all tumors by 70% in the first 3 weeks. John 2H. Hi, John. James Megan. Hi, James. Truth Seeker. I went to the top there. William, Joseph, Mike Mansfield. Well, we had lots of people commenting there tonight. Katja. I'm just going to scroll down through the names here. Yeah, and so that gives me the whole winter to figure out the equipment. Chad. Yeah, good night, everybody. It doesn't look like we had very many comments tonight. I must be missing something. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Got about 30 to 40 comments. Does that seem right to anybody? So we got 35 votes that 90%, 89% of people said it should be a crime to kill people with nuclear radiation in hospitals worldwide. Yeah, I agree with you. And then the other ones must have made a mistake, I guess. Yeah, well, I'm using the bike for research, Steve. Robert, thank you. Just make sure I say goodnight to everybody I could. Like, first off, you got to do all the maintenance on equipment. You got to get all the parts for equipment. You got to be able to come up with money to use the equipment. It's a nightmarish cycle. But you can't do the research without the equipment. And if we didn't have the equipment, we wouldn't know we had an extinction event. We wouldn't be able to prove it, right? We wouldn't have the documentation that shows unequivocally. There's no joy in the things I do outside of it's good for planet Earth and it's good for everybody and it's good for the species, right? It's like it's so hard to do this kind of work. And I failed many, many times, but I've never given up. I just made it better and then went and done it the next chance we got, right? How many times did I go to Alaska and run out of money and be stuck somewhere with nothing to keep the operation going and end up eating very little food for up to a week at a time, waiting for my pension to show up to give me enough money to get back out on the ocean. And I wouldn't come home. I'd just stay out there. I wouldn't care. We got to find out if this was an extinction event. And sure enough, this was an extinction event, which set the course for the future, which sets the course for what you see today. The evidence is everything. I don't know. Some people don't understand it, but the evidence is everything. If we don't have the evidence, we can't prove nothing. And I went out there today in the woods, yesterday and the day before, never seen a single bird, not one bird, not a finch, not a sparrow. I see nothing. No tracks, no rabbit tracks. I see nothing. And if you experience that like I do, it'll light a fire under you that'll never go out. Yeah, I did, yeah. Yeah, ain't that something, eh? Yeah, I got an old machine. It wasn't very expensive either. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great night, folks.
Friday.